Hey everyone, welcome to Ex-Fundie Diaries. My name is Ellie, my pronouns are she, they, and this video is about how I miss rules. This little pamphlet right here is an assignment that I did in 6th grade called Rules for My Life, and later in this video I'll be going through these. But before I do, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why I miss rules now. I began walking away from Christian fundamentalism in 2014, so 8 years ago. And that may sound like a long time to some people, but it doesn't feel like very long in relation to the rest of my life. Especially in my experience, being born into it, the brainwashing just goes so incredibly deep. And I get questions sometimes asking, how does it affect your life now? Now that you're out, you're free to live your life the way that you want, how does your upbringing affect you? And the answer is in many ways. But what I'm going to talk about today is, for me personally, one of the most impactful and ongoing ways that I am affected by my upbringing. I have this ongoing craving for rules. Growing up, I had the Bible, which we thought of as our rule book for life. And to me, that's actually the heart of Christian fundamentalism, using the Bible as your rule book for life. And of course, there's so much variation when it comes to how different fundamentalists interpret the verses, the books, to create the rules. But for the most part, there are so many tenets that each different fundamentalist group has in their interpretations. Even when fundies argue with each other and point fingers back and forth about the details, many of the main tenets are the same. But for me, growing up, there was a certain level of safety that I felt having all of these rules. And there was a certain level of certainty that I felt that I could rely on. It was a formula. Follow these rules and you'll be okay. God will be pleased with you. God will bless you. You'll be a good person, worthy of love, and you'll live a good life. Of course, that safety and that certainty, unfortunately, was really a facade. It wasn't real. And of course now, I ultimately choose autonomy. I am trying to choose myself in life and to go after things that I want, things that bring me joy. Even as I said that, I felt like a lot of resistance. So it's a work in progress for sure. But just because I am actively making those choices now as an adult, doesn't mean that I don't still really, really miss the rules. And when I say I miss the rules, I don't mean that I just think about a time in my life when I had these rules to lean on, to look to. I mean, like, my brain makes up rules in place of the old ones that I used to have. I no longer read the Bible. I no longer try to obey my parents. I no longer go to church, but my brain is so addicted to having outside influences tell me what to do, whether that's a book, the Bible, or authority figures, my parents and church leaders, etc., that my brain will just create rules from other things, societal expectations, things that I have read or heard about. And these rules are for decisions that don't have a right answer. For example, I have been job searching recently, and as of yesterday, I have accepted a position. I'm going to be a receptionist for a veterinary hospital. And I am very excited about this because as I've shared, I think once before on my channel, I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was a little kid. And that dream was discouraged because of my assigned gender. So I feel really grateful and really excited. However, making this decision was really, really hard. I had some different options. I was applying and receiving interest from multiple different kinds of positions. When I have to make a decision like that, it feels like there's so much weighing on my choice. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't still have a lot of anxiety about it, a lot of worrying if it was the right choice, wondering if I should have made a different decision. And I think too, I am personally in a time of my life that is very uncertain. I'm going through a lot of transitions and a lot of things I am unsure about, and the path is very unclear. And so I am missing rules more than ever. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have this pamphlet called Rules for My Life. And this was an assignment that my whole class had to do in 6th grade when I was going to the Anglican school. The date here says October 29th, 2002. So I was 11 years old. And I do like the artistic aspect of this little pamphlet that I did. I cut out some pictures to include. This one here, I remember, is from a presentation that I gave to one of our homeschool co-ops in 5th grade. I don't remember all of the guidelines for this assignment, but I think we were just supposed to come up with 6 rules for our life based on scripture. So we'd pick a verse of the Bible and then make a rule about it. So the first page says, I will, number 1, first rule for life, put God first in all things. And the scripture, which these do not have references, by the way, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. So this first rule, pretty straightforward, definitely a rule that I carried on throughout all of my Fundie days. Putting God first in all things was something that I constantly strove for. And it was a really difficult rule to follow because it's so vague. Who knows what that actually means? I would try to figure it out in every single little decision or scenario. And I think this is one of the reasons why I got so sucked into charismatic ways of expressing my faith, because I needed to know, I needed to have this guidance from the Holy Spirit. What does it mean, Lord, to put you first in this scenario, in that scenario, in this tiny little decision that I'm making about what I'm going to eat for breakfast sometimes? Eat, drink, breathe, live, sleep, Jesus. That was absolutely the number 1 rule that I held as a Fundie. Put God first in all things. Rule number 2, honor my mother and father. Of course, that is the second rule. And the verse that it is based off of is, honor your mother and father as the Lord your God has commanded you. And something that my mom would say very often throughout my childhood was that that commandment was the first one with a promise, because the rest of that verse, if I'm thinking of the same one, says, so that your days will be long in the land that the Lord your God gives you. Something like that. I may not have all the words correctly, but I'll try to put it on the screen. It was the perfect formula. Obey your parents and God will bless you with long life. And so the illustration that I chose for this one is this smiley face because, of course, you can't just obey your parents, you have to do it joyfully. And some of the responses that this smiley face is saying to their parents: I'd be glad to. I love you, Dad. Yes, Mom. Sure, Dad. Would you like me to do that for you? I love you, Mom. I don't agree with it, but I'll do it. That one's a little edgy to even say that you don't agree with it. Okay, Dad. I'd be glad to. That was one that my mom wanted me to say often. She would coach me to say in response to when she gave me a command. When she told me to do something, she coached me to respond, I'd be glad to. Which was often a lie. But yeah, honor my father and mother. That was a rule that I continued to try to follow even when I disobeyed my parents as an adult. When I was 19 and 20 and I disobeyed my parents by number 1, moving out, and number 2, beginning to date even though it was forbidden, I still tried my very best to still honor them. And that was sort of like a switch that I made in my mind. The rule kind of changed a little bit at that point because I knew that my parents were not following God themselves very well. They were failing to be very good Christians, especially my dad. And so I altered the rule a little bit, and I honestly worked overtime to try to make up for the fact that I was disobeying them in those couple of instances. I felt immense shame at disobeying them. So I put all of my energy and effort into honoring them, spending time with them, treating them in a very kind way as much as I could manage, even while being abused in so many ways and witnessing the abuse of my siblings, etc. And I remained extremely enmeshed with my mom, even a couple years after beginning my faith deconstruction. That took a lot of time and a lot of therapy to get to where I am now with boundaries and a very, very different relationship. And with my dad, I would just butter him up, still try to serve him in little ways, I don't know, getting the door for him, complimenting him. I talked about this in my last video, but calling him daddy was one of the ways that I tried to go above and beyond in honoring him. Rule number 3, not fight with my sibling. And I have a picture of me and Annie here standing in a field of flowers, very idyllic. And this thought bubble says, today they're not so bad. And the verse is, behold how good it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. And this was something that Annie and I talked a lot about in our recent video together about sibling dynamics in our homeschool Fundie family, where I had a really hard time, especially during these years, getting along with Annie. It was like one of my biggest struggles. So it doesn't surprise me at all that this was one of my main rules. It was the 3rd one. But with this rule, as I carried it on throughout my Fundie years, it's definitely different from the other rules because there was a genuine love and care behind trying not to fight with my younger siblings, both of them, and to just have a really good relationship with them. That was a very genuine thing. That was something that I wanted and still really value to this day. Okay, this next rule is rough, and I guess I'd like to say content warning for emotional abuse towards myself. It's me beating myself up and being really unkind to myself. So you may want to skip this part if that's going to be triggering for you. So rule number 4 for my life is shut my mouth. And as you can see, the illustration I chose is a picture of me, and then like I drew a hand that I cut out and put over my mouth. The very unkind things that I wrote around that picture of me with a hand over my mouth. Don't talk back. Put a cork in it. Isn't your jaws tired by now? Cut it out. Don't talk. Zip it. Hush up. Shut the trap door. Hush now. Don't talk. Be quiet in big letters. Close the window. Take a break. Take the key and lock her up. And, you know, as I'm sure you could guess, based on some of my past videos talking about the emotional abuse that I experienced, many of these things were being said to me by my parents. So, this one makes me really sad. I feel really sad for my younger self. It really encapsulates the way that I felt so deeply unworthy and just like such a nuisance. It really shows the self-hatred that I felt and that I have struggled with my whole life. And here's the verse to go with it. Let the words of my mouth be acceptable in your sight. And what I think is so interesting about that verse is that there are a lot of different ways that that verse could be interpreted. Someone could make the rule, you know, my words will be kind to others. Or even like, I won't be mean with my words. I won't put others down. Like something like that. But what I took from that verse was, I need to shut up. And I guess maybe that's a little bit of what you hear when I say things like in my last video, I said that I was long-winded, and some very nice commenters said, please don't apologize for that. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing an unscripted video today, because my perfectionism would prefer a script so that I can have things explained in a, here I am struggling for a word, in a straightforward and concise way where I'm not rambling, but I'm just trying to embrace where I'm at right now in life. So thank you to the people who said that I don't need to apologize for being long-winded. I do really appreciate that, and I am grateful for the progress that I've made thus far in working towards learning to love myself. I'd say I have a long way to go, but I think one thing I've been practicing lately is being kind to myself for not always being kind to myself, if that makes sense. Sometimes it just feels impossible to show love to myself or to feel love for myself. And my tendency is to beat myself up for that. To be like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you love yourself? That just contributes to the shame spiral and the circle of shame that just keeps going and going. So yeah, trying to be kind to myself for not always being able to be kind to myself is something I've been working on. Or just trying to be a little less mean, you know? Starting there. Okay, this is another rough one. It's another rough one. Rule number 5 is keep control of myself. And the picture that I chose is this adorable little beagle. You can tell that they're very eager to please whatever human is talking to them. And the little thought bubble says, "This is hard." And the command is sit, stay. I think I've always really related to dogs. And there's so many reasons for that. Some of it was the theology that I was being taught. In many of the churches that I went to when I was a little kid, they would teach that we should strive to be like dogs instead of cats. Because cats say, "You love me, you feed me, I must be God." Whereas dogs say, "You love me, you feed me, you must be God." It was this idea that dogs are an example for us as humans to how we should relate to God. It was putting us in our place, in our proper place. And I actually did a short Twitter thread about this, and someone responded that cats have boundaries. So of course, evangelicals would say that we shouldn't be like cats. And I really love that response. That's a very good point. And I've been learning to love and appreciate cats more as an adult. And I honestly think getting out of Christian fundamentalism has helped me to see cats in a totally new way and to actually start to really love and appreciate them. Now, I'm still a little bit wary of them, like I don't feel super comfortable with them, but in my new position as a vet receptionist, part of my role will be to handle animals, including cats. So I think I'm going to get to know them a lot better in the coming months. So maybe I can give an update about that at some point. But back to the rule, keep control of myself. Basically that meant, I think, at this time as an 11-year-old, just do the shit that you're supposed to do. Follow the rules. It was almost like a rule about the rules. Control yourself. Be perfect, basically. And the verse that this rule is based off of is, "But the fruit of the Spirit is self-control." And again, there are so many way less harsh ways to interpret that verse, but this is the way it made the most sense to me. Self-control basically meant be perfect, and perfection is impossible. No wonder this little dog is thinking, this is hard. The sixth and final rule in my rules for life is not complain and keep a good attitude. There's another picture of me, and there is a cloud raining down on me, and the water is splashing off of the brim of the hat. And it says, "Keep telling yourself, it's a good day." And I try really hard not to use this word very often because it seems to be a little overused, but I think I feel pretty confident saying that that is a form of self-gaslighting. At the very least, it's an invalidation, a self-invalidation systematically over time. Keep telling yourself it's a good day. No matter what the circumstances are. And actually, it makes me think of this tweet that I saw recently from Joe Lumen. They critique the idea that it's a sin to complain or to have anything other than joy, regardless of your circumstances. So it's a quote tweet from Joe in response to someone named Justin Bullington. I'm assuming he probably has husband, father, pastor in his bio, something like that. Let me just see, out of curiosity. Pastor, husband, father of four, Bible teacher, host of the Theo Bros podcast? That sounds like a parody. Okay, so that's who we're working with here. So his original tweet says, "Discontentment is sin. Fundamentally, we become discontent because we've chosen to doubt God's good and perfect will for our lives." And there's a couple of Bible references. Philippians 4:11 through 13, Exodus 20:17. And then Joe quote tweeted his tweet and said, 1. Says a white Christian heterosexual cisgender pastor with a passport from the global north. Saying this to marginalized people is just cruelty. I love that. That is so honest. It is cruelty Absolutely, I 100% agree with that. And I really wish that I had had anything close to that perspective growing up, because there was such a lack of empathy. And then the second part of Joe's tweet says, 2. If this is their theology, why do so many white evangelicals whine so much? You all whine about what people wear, for fuck's sake. So I just wanted to share that tweet because I think it's very relevant to this rule that I made, the last and final rule in my rules for life: not complain and keep a good attitude. And again, the implication is it doesn't matter what you're experiencing. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. Any injustices you might be facing, keep telling yourself it's a good day. And I forgot to mention the verse that goes with this one is, "Do not complain, brethren." And then the last page says, "The end." Just puts a stamp of approval on all those rules. All of these rules that I followed so devotedly and so heavily are still ingrained in certain ways. They're still in my psyche even when I don't realize. And so it takes work to recognize them, to root them out, and to create new patterns. I'm grateful to have the choices now. I would not go back for anything. Yes, I am dealing with the trauma and the ramifications of the way that I was raised. But I can actually breathe out here, and that's worth more than any of the feelings of safety or security I had before.